including Karen, Vera, and Michael. We have also here our technical working group chairperson, Stuart. For your information, this introduction session of the webinar is being recorded, and the recorded version will be uploaded on FSC website. So this webinar will be conducted in English, and we provide Spanish simultaneous translation during this webinar. So this is a panel you see in your Zoom. And if you would like to access the Spanish translation, then please click the small globe icon on the bottom right, says interpretation, and change your channel. So this presentation is structured as following. First, we would like to provide you with a quick recap on the background of conversion discussion and why there is a conversion remedy procedure. And secondly, we would like to show you how does the procedure look like, including its structure and some of the highlights of the remedy requirements as well. And thirdly, we will give you an overview of the consultation content. And finally, we will have a 40 minutes question and answer session. For this session, please feel free to post your questions anytime under the chat box. And of course, you're also more than welcome to raise your hand later in those Q&A session, and we will unmute you so you can raise your question directly. And all the questions will be answered in the sequence received. So now let's start with a very quick background recap. Conversion has been an important topic in FSC for years. From 2008, FSC convened Expert Team D to develop assessment on FSC conversion rules. And later at the GA 2011, Motion 18 was passed, and it requested a chamber balance working group to be established for the issue of conversion. And at the GA 2014, Motion 12 asked FSC to fast-track the implementation of Motion 18 and to consider under what circumstances and conditions can area converted post-1994 be certified. And most recently, in 2017, Motion 7 was passed. The membership requested FSC to develop a holistic policy on conversion and appropriate treatment at principal, criteria, and indicator levels. So to implement Motion 7, FSC established two groups. One is the Chamber Balance Working Group with 6 members. It was established in summer 2018, and they have concluded their process by end of 2020. They have developed 4 drafts of FSC policy and conversion, and the working group agreed on almost all elements of the policy, including to state clearly that FSC opposes conversion. However, the working group did not reach consensus on Principle 3, which outlines the remedy requirements for past conversion. FSC is currently developing a white paper on how to finalize Principle 3, and updates on the finalization of the policy will be updated on FSC website. So the other group is our technical working group with 4 expert members, and it was established in November 2019. The process is expected to conclude in March next year. The technical working group is responsible for translating the policy into operational practices by developing criteria, indicator, and thresholds for conversion, as well as the conversion remedy procedure. And so far, our technical working group have held 41 online meetings and 2 intensive discussion weeks, and have developed 2 drafts of the conversion remedy procedure. And the second draft is being consulted through this consultation now. So the conversion remedy procedure had its first round of consultation in Q2 last year. And in total, 135 participants joined the consultation. We have prepared a synopsis report for you to give you a summary of the consultation results, as well as how those comments helped us shaping the second draft. This report is available in the consultation platform. And we also like to take this opportunity to thank all of the consultation participants for sharing your views and helping us improving the procedure. So before diving into the procedure itself, we would like to remind you that the FSC has 4 ongoing processes relevant to conversion. So FSC is conducting 3 separate but concurrent consultations, one on the procedure, one on policy for association, and the other one on policy for association's remediation framework. And you can participate in all of those consultations via the consultation platform. So now let's take a look on the procedure. Same as the first draft, the second draft procedure also contains 6 parts, and each part has its specific milestone. Through the following slides, we will walk you through each part. In particular, we want to present you the improvements in the second draft of the procedure comparing with the first draft. So let's start with part 1. For organizations applying for forest management certification or association with FSC, if the organization is identified to be involved in conversion post-November 1994 and prior to the effective date of the conversion policy, then the organization will enter into Part 1 of the procedure. So Part 1 of the procedure sets out general rules and principles for the application of the procedure. Both the first draft and second draft include requirements on the application of the cutoff rule and how the procedure applies to small-scale smallholders. And based on the consultation feedback, the technical working group expanded requirements on the following 4 areas. First, expanded requirements on conversion threshold. The second draft procedure provided further explanations on the conversion threshold and how it shall be used to determine the constitution of conversion. And secondly, the second draft now defines that FSC dispute resolution system will be used to manage any complaints with the procedure. And thirdly, the second draft clarifies that the responsibility of implementing the remedy process rests with the organization. And last and very importantly, the second draft requires the organization to establish a grievance system. The system will be used to collect, track, and record grievances associated with all aspects of the procedure. So when the organization established the grievance system and signed agreement with FSC, subjecting themselves and their remedy process to FSC dispute resolution system, and declare their commitment to FSC mission, then the organization can proceed to Part 2 of the procedure. So Part 2 of the procedure defines the requirements for baseline assessment to identify the harm and the process to follow in order to agree on the required remedy. So the first draft on the left-hand side divides the baseline requirements into environmental and social aspects, while the second draft on the right-hand side lays out more comprehensive requirements on the baseline assessment process. And the second draft also includes requirements on, for example, independent assessor for social-related assessment, latest draft of conversion policy. So now let's go to a little bit of detail of Part 2. So under Part 2, firstly, the organization shall identify and map the converted area. And second, the independent assessor shall identify affected rights holders and affected stakeholders. And thirdly, the independent assessor shall conduct social baseline assessment. And fourthly, organization can conduct environmental baseline assessments. And after the analysis of those assessment results, and the results will be used to determine the site and actions needed to remedy the environmental and social harm. And this section of the procedure lays out the remedy principles and requirements, such as how to prioritize site selection and remedy action, and how to determine social remedy activities. And lastly, a baseline assessment report shall be developed to include all findings and analysis from the assessment processes. It shall also include information on the identified affected rights holders, stakeholders, and how they were consulted through the process. So, following the baseline process, when an organization reached agreement with affected rights holders on the harm caused by conversion and the required remedy, organization can then proceed to part 3 of the procedure. So part 3 of the procedure describes the requirements of the concept note for the remedy plan. The concept note shall briefly introduce the proposed action for remedy of the determined harm. And one of the key information to be included in this concept note is the proposed timeline to achieve initial implementation threshold. So this threshold specifies the minimum remedy stage that an organization has to achieve in order to become eligible for association or FM certification. So the first draft on the left-hand side defines initial implementation threshold, but the definition focused very much on environmental remedy. And the first draft also provided this pictorial representation of third restorative continuum, indicating where does this threshold sit. And on the right-hand side, the second draft procedure clarified this initial implementation threshold by dividing it into initial environmental threshold and initial social remedy threshold, and provided two pictorial representations of each threshold to facilitate the interpretation of them. And further information can be found in the procedure and also under the part 3 and its terms and definition section. So this concept note shall be submitted to the third-party verifier for review and approval prior to developing the remedy plan as in part 4. So if the concept has been approved by third-party verifier, then the organization can proceed to part 4 of the procedure. So part 4 of the procedure describes the requirements for the remedy plan. The remedy plan shall be based on the approved concept note and baseline assessment. The plan shall also include scope, vision, goals, objectives, targets, and indicators of the remedy project, and shall have clear timeframes and benchmarks for achieving those goals. And TWG has provided different examples of remedy targets and goals related to environmental and social key attributes under part 4 of the procedure. So this remedy plan shall be agreed by affected rights holders through an process, and the plan shall be submitted to the third-party verifier for approval. So if the remedy plan has been approved by the third-party verifier and agreed by affected rights holders, organization can then proceed to part 5 and part 6 of the procedure. So part 5 describes the process from when the organization commences with its implementation of the remedy plan, while part 6 defines how the remedy process shall be monitored. So we would like to present you with a comparison between the first draft and second draft for part 5 and part 6 together. The first draft focused on the implementation of initial implementation threshold under part 5. So after achieving which, the organization can apply for forest management certification or association. While the second draft emphasized both the initial implementation threshold and the end goal of the remedy project. And secondly, the first draft speaks about affected stakeholders in general, while the second draft places clear priority to affected rights holders. And thirdly, the first draft speaks little about measurable indicators for the implementation of remedy plan, while the second draft includes requirements on how measurable indicators shall be established to assess and monitor the implementation of the remedy process. And fourthly, the first draft defines that if the organization stops or postpones the remedy process and apply to resume the process again later, they will always need to go back to part 3 of the procedure, which is the concept note. While for the second draft, an evaluation of the implementation status of the remedy plan will be carried out if the organization applied to resume the remedy process. If the organization is identified to be still on track, then per agreement by the affected rights holders, the organization may have the chance to resume the remedy process from where they have stopped. And the last major change is that the first draft defines requirements on external monitoring of the remedy process, while the second draft expands the requirements to cover both internal and external monitoring of the remedy process. So this wraps up a quick introduction on the conversion remedy procedure. And now let's have a look on the consultation content. So the public consultation contains 10 sections in total, and those turning green now contains consultation questions, which we would like to hear your feedback on. And following this public consultation, so actually during this consultation, we are going to have 2 additional webinars to introduce the procedure. And once the consultation completes on the 14th of August, the technical working group will work together to analyze all the feedback received and to develop the final draft procedure. And between December and March next year, the procedure will be finalized and submitted to Policy Steering Committee and the Board of Directors for recommendation and approval. So this concludes the introductory presentation of today's webinar. And my colleagues recording the session can stop the recording now so that we can move to the question and answer session.